Like if I meet you, you know when like you're hanging out with another comedian, he says the N-word around you for the first time?
Yeah.
I like that. That's a little trust that I'm in the circle.
Here we go.
of
Let's
cool
talk
people.
about this real quick, okay?
Uh-huh.
I'm not with that. What you guys are doing in Austin.
What do you mean?
Well, let's be real. I don't like some of the words you guys use freely.
Like what?
It's like edgelord. It's like
Not all of it.
I know, but
there
it's
is
becoming
certain-
so hacky to me that people, you
100%.
guys use these words just for the shock factor. It's
100%.
like I'm not into it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think the R word sometimes, but I would never say the N word in any environment.
Okay.
On March 7th, 2023, Joe Rogan officially made the comedy Mothership open to the public, which started an epic comedy bull run in Austin, Texas. And all of Joe Rogan's comedy pals moved to Austin in hopes of capitalizing on the gravitational pull of the Rogan sphere. And for 2 years or so, they absolutely did. Like for a long time, there was no other city in the United States whose comedy scene was growing faster. And even though it was immediately slapped with the anti-woke label, it was never as controversial to perform there as it is now. Because over the past few months or so, the Austin comedy scene's reputation has taken a hit so bad that honestly it feels like it's been rug pulled past the point of no return. And now it's almost trendy to recognize that that style of comedy there is, in fact, hack. Mark Maron, Dan Soder, Anthony Jeselnik, and even Bobby Lee, as you saw in the opening clip there, have all spoken publicly about how the comedy in Austin is a disgrace, which I'm sure you're aware of by now, as those clips have been circling all corners of the internet. So what I wanted to cover in this video today are first-hand stories from the green room of the Mothership that smaller comedians and internet figures have leaked online. Because these are stories told by people who genuinely tried to be a part of the Austin comedy scene, but had such a bad experience that they had to speak out about it. For example, this smaller comedian named Mark Pugh moved to Austin a while back in hopes of growing his name, but just recently moved away because the other comics there wouldn't stop bringing up his race whenever they were around him.
I personally don't want to be the only black person around a bunch of white people, and the only thing y'all saying to me is some shit about how I'm black. Like, a dead ass don't want to be around that shit. Because when I'm around, if I'm around the only white person, I'm not gonna be like, "Hey, you white." That's some white people shit. I don't do that in conversation. We might do that shit on stage, maybe, but even then, bro, let's have better shit to say on stage. There's a lot of people that don't know when to stop trying to be a clown, trying to out funny each other, and don't none of it be funny. I don't want to hear 50 white guys come up to me and almost say the N-word. It's like 50 white people come to you and say, "What's up, my ninja?" I don't want to hear that shit. Just almost saying the N-word or trying to say it. Let's talk about something else.
And honestly, this clip tells you just about everything you need to know about the so-called comedy mecca in Austin. A brand new comic moves there chasing the dream, only to end up leaving because every conversation with other comics boiled down to, "Hey bro, you're black." Haha, get it? Like, it is the absolute cheapest, laziest way to get a laugh, and the fact that it happened enough times for this guy to finally move cities just speaks volumes to why Austin comedy is seeing a decline recently. Like, the Mothership is an echo chamber where the only thing comedians know how to do is tiptoe around slurs. Because in Austin, offensive equal funny, I guess. No wonder the whole scene already feels like it's collapsing under its own hype. Another thing that points to the Mothership's downfall is that the biggest names there, like Joe Rogan, Tony Hinchcliffe, and even Shane Gillis, are some of the most sensitive comedians imaginable, which is sort of ironic. Like, a huge part of their jobs revolve around roasting, but as soon as someone says something that they don't like, they get all butthurt about it and kick them out of the club. So much so that Joe Rogan has his ex-Navy SEAL bodyguards lock up your cell phone before entering the club. I mean, Joe Rogan's so paranoid about this that he even kicked out Andrew Callaghan from the green room on accident, just because someone mentioned that Andrew was a journalist, which is a really broad definition and doesn't really do Andrew Callaghan's channel justice. Joe Rogan even knew who Callaghan was, but without even looking his way, he had his royal bodyguards escort the guy out of the green room out of fear that he'd tape what was going down there.
Why haven't you been on the Joe Rogan Experience? Well, there could be two reasons for that. One, which is probably most likely, is that I'm not popular, famous, and influential enough to be on JRE. Two, could be related to a little green room spat that I had with Mr. Joe Rogan at his comedy club in Austin, Texas. So I'm not even a Joe Rogan hater, and I thought the Mothership was actually pretty tight, especially how they lock your phones up in these magnetically sealed plastic sleeves when you enter the door. It definitely brings the anxiety levels down and makes it so comedians can push the envelope a bit more with their material, so it keeps comedy and experimentation alive without the fear of cancel culture. I was in Austin doing a couple different podcasts. The first podcast was Lex Friedman, and then the following day after that, I did the Matt and Shane Secret podcast. And unfortunately, Matt was out of town, but the homie Lemaire Lee, shout out to my boy, was there replacing Matt for that day. So that night after the podcast, Shane had a set at the Mothership Comedy Club. So he invited me, and in between sets, I'm chilling at the bar downstairs, and I'm getting like lightweight blown up by fans, which is fine. You know, I love fans. It was chill, but I was kind of like in a more relaxed headspace. I wanted to just doze off, you know, listen to comedy, chill. And so I told Lemaire, I'm like, yo, can I go upstairs to the green room? I'm trying to, you know, kick back and, you know, lay low for a bit. He's like, man, I could take you there, but just so you know, Joe Rogan's a bit territorial about that green room. Like, so it's at your own risk. And I'm like, dude, no way, it's gonna be fine. Joe Rogan's reacted to like 7 of my videos because Jamie always plays them. So I'm like, it's gonna be chill. So me and Lemaire take the elevator up to the secret green room at the Mothership. There's 5 comedians in there, all in their mid-20s. Everybody recognizes me except for Joe Rogan. So everybody's dapping me up. Lemaire says, hey, Joe, it's my homie Andrew. Shake Joe Rogan's hand. I put some popcorn in the microwave, which I felt like was establishing myself as a member of the green room. And then I turn around and I see Joe Rogan like yelling at the security guard. And he's yelling, who let this fucking journalist in here? Kick him the fuck out. I can hear Joe saying this. I guess somebody told him that I was like a journalist, so he maybe thought that I was a Daily Beast reporter that had snaked my way into his safe space to ask him about ivermectin, which is a valid concern. So before I could even get kicked out, I was like, Lemaire, I gotta get out of here. And I walked down the stairs and went back into general population.
So when you hear a story like this, it doesn't really feel like a healthy comedy scene. It feels insecure, culty, and way too fragile. Like Andrew wasn't even trying to start anything. He was just there as a guest, laying low and eating some popcorn. But Rogan immediately had a panic attack as if Andrew was some undercover TMZ reporter trying to expose him. That's where the scene is at now. The comedy club is like a gated community where Joe Rogan is the landlord and everyone else is just trying to not get evicted. The environment is way too fragile, and as a result, its reputation has taken a real beating as of late. And trust me, they know exactly what kind of image they're portraying with all the right-wing buzzword jokes and all the anti-woke talking points, especially Shane Gillis. Like just the other day, apparently Shane Gillis was on stage with Joe Rogan, doing like a duo stand-up comedy sort of thing, and as soon as Joe Rogan started saying his trans jokes, apparently Shane stopped him and was like, what's so funny about that? Which made Joe Rogan repeat the joke, making Shane ask him what's so funny about it again, which would have been just amazing to witness in real life. So Shane Gillis, who's by far the biggest regular at the Mothership, really stood up to Lord Joe Rogan while on stage, which kind of points to how conscious he is of the Austin comedy image and is trying to put out the flames for the sake of his reputation as well. So I commend Shane for doing stuff like that and turning down the Saudi Arabian Blood Money Festival, but don't get me wrong, Shane's not entirely innocent in this whole Austin comedy disgrace here, okay? Like sure, he's by far funnier than names like Rogan and Hinchcliffe and David Lucas, but at the end of the day, he lives there full time. He performs there weekly, and he's buddy-buddy with the hackmen in the green room after their performances. And so a lot of people online speculate that behind the scenes, he is no different than the guys he hangs out with. And recently, a guy named Brian McCarthy kind of confirmed this on his podcast, as according to him, he actually got into a little verbal argument with Shane Gillis backstage at the Mothership. And so, to preface this story, just know that McCarthy and Shane had a minor beef about 6 years ago, and McCarthy thought it wasn't even major enough for Shane to remember it. So, before heading into the Mothership green room and seeing Shane for the first time since then, McCarthy was actually asking Shane's friends if he'd even remember something that small. And according to Shane's friends, he's got a bit of a reputation among comics in Austin for being super thin-skinned and kind of dramatic whenever he's dealing with other stand-up comedians. Also, obviously take this guy's story with a grain of salt.
So my point is that when I was talking to this person, I said, I know Shane lives down there and I know that he's friends with Kurt. Now I wasn't like nervous about seeing Shane or any of that. I don't give a fuck. But the person asked me, I said, I wonder if I run into this guy, I wonder if he's even going to remember. And this person who is pretty tied into this group of people, this person said, yeah, Shane is, and Shane, this is the reputation you have. They said he is very thin-skinned. And I would almost guarantee that he will remember this.
So this is where things get real juicy, because according to McCarthy, Shane confronted him with Tony Hinchcliffe about this tiny little thing that happened 6 years ago, making a huge scene about it in front of everyone at Mitzi's Bar, which is a bar in the comedy Mothership. And of course, Shane had every right to confront him about this, but being that this beef was so tiny and 6 years old, it's just sort of funny that Shane would hold on to something like this, especially after having this huge career since then. But to be fair, I also think it's pretty cowardly of Brian McCarthy to air something private like this out to the public, but it sure does make for some good content.
So I go into the Mitzi Bar thing. I go on with Kurt. I see Joe. I said, hey, you know, I kind of like pretended like I watched the hour. Right. So great, fine. So I'm talking to Joe, and then Shane comes in. Okay. Shane's about 6'3", maybe something like that, 6'4", maybe. Big guy, little mustache, but big guy. And kind of comes in, goes right over to Joe, says to Joe, hey, and he gives him kind of a hug. I mean, they're clearly good friends. And then Joe says to Shane, I want to introduce you to Brian. He's a good friend of mine from New York. And Shane immediately goes, I know who you are. You said a bunch of shit about me on your show, and then you tweeted it. So I'm like, oh, okay, I guess we're doing this.
Yeah,
so,
pretty confrontational.
So I said to Shane, I said, well, not really. I said a bunch of shit about you, but I never tweeted it. I don't really tweet. I said, but I did say a bunch of shit about you. So Shane is standing there, and he's not aggressive, but he's visibly annoyed. So this guy, Tony, comes over, right? Tony stands next to Shane. And the image that popped in my head is, you ever see A Christmas Story with the leg and everything?
Sure.
Do you remember the one bully that had the coonskin cap?
Yeah,
and
Scott Farkas.
Yeah, very good. And then the little guy with the little derby hat.
Of course,
and he goes, are you going to cry, little baby? You're going to cry? So I looked at Tony and I was like, wow, he reminds me of the little bully from. Yeah. But again, there was nobody was bullying me, but they were standing there. And Tony says like, oh, hey, he came over to say hi to Shane. And he goes, hey, Shane, what's going on? And then Shane, like literally, and we're all standing within like 5 feet of each other. This bar is not big, and we're all in a pretty tight space right at the bar. So Shane's like kind of motions to me. I'm right across from him. And he goes, yeah, this guy said a bunch of shit about me. And then he tweeted it, and I interrupted him again. I said, I never tweeted. I said the shit, but I didn't tweet.
Right.
And he's like, well, he said a bunch of shit about me. So I just said, I attempted just to put it to bed sort of immediately.
Right.
And I said, listen, this is how I remember it. You came on the show about 6 years plus ago. I thought that you were a member of the audience. You came in, you were actually the guest on the show. I didn't realize that. You were visibly annoyed that I didn't know that you were, the guest on the show. And then we had this show. And again, I was drinking. Sure, fine, whatever. That's fine. And then that night, we did a show at the New York Comedy Club, and somehow I ended up hosting it. I still don't know how that worked out. And I called you Sean Gillis, and you were annoyed by that too. So I'm like talking, and then I'm kind of like, and Joe's standing there kind of with his hand at his head.
Right.
And he goes like, and he's like, it's like Michael apologizing for Fredo, So I just decide I'm going to extricate myself from this area.
So right off the bat, Shane sees him and confronts him about something pretty small that Brian said about Shane 6 years ago, which to some people is applaudable as Shane was addressing it head on as soon as he saw this guy. But at the same time, it's a little bit petty, no? I mean, who even is this guy? Like, if you're Shane Gillis, why even waste your breath on someone like him, who would jump at the opportunity to be in a beef with the Shane Gillis online, right? But according to him, after ending the convo, apparently Shane went to the bar and started talking shit about the guy to all his pals. And so as you'll hear shortly, when Brian McCarthy went to the bar, Shane escalated the argument and was shouting across the bar, demanding that McCarthy apologize for what he did all the way back in 2019. Which, if true, just gives me the impression that Shane's acting a little like Joe Rogan was with Andrew Callaghan.
So I go to the bar, and I'm waiting for the bartender to pay attention. And Shane is at the bar, like 3 people down from me. So I'm waiting, and Shane is clearly telling these guys about me or saying something about me.
Fucking guy.
And then Shane looks over at me, and he does that De Niro thing with his fingers, And he goes, you know what you did. You know what you did with his finger. So I take my fingers out and I do it back. And I went, I'm in your head. I'm in your head. You know, I'm in your head. I don't know why, but I'm in your head. I don't know why. I'm in your head. I'm in your head. And then so the redhead guy like says to Shane, like, what is going on with like you and this guy? Like, what is
why
this?
is there like
And now this is where our evening could have this could have taken
this was the fork in the road.
Exactly right. Because Shane says that guy said a bunch of shit about me on his podcast and he's being a pussy. And this is what Shane, you're going to hear this. Maybe this is what you said. So whatever. He goes, and he's being a pussy and he won't apologize.
Oof.
So he didn't call me a pussy, but he called me a pussy to a certain extent.
You're being a pussy.
I'm being a pussy.
Displaying.
He didn't say this pussy did. So there is a little bit of a semantics there.
Yeah.
And again, by the way, I'm not even worked up about any of this. I'm just kind of like, dude, whatever, man.
Yeah, this was 6 years ago.
Yeah. So I say to him, I said, listen, if I was a pussy, I would apologize to you. But I'm not apologizing to you.
Right.
What I will say to you is I will say a non-apology. I'm sorry that I am making you so upset. And that's as good as it's going to get. I said, that's it. I'm sorry that for some reason I'm making you so upset. And he's looking at me and I said, and then the drink came back and I said, to bartender, I said, thank you. And I just walked away and I go back to the girl.
So yeah, just a pretty heated argument coming right out of the Austin comedy mothership. And of course, I am torn on whether this guy's story is true or not, because honestly, he could just be using Shane's name for clout. But if this were true, I think it's a pretty good example of the environment that some of the biggest names have cultivated at the mothership over the years. Like, they love the drama and the gossip, despite saying that they don't read the comments and that they're all a happy brotherhood. But don't get me wrong, I am not on this guy's side whatsoever, but do let me know what you guys think of that little spat and the current trajectory of the Austin comedy scene. And with that being said, thanks so much for watching.